Now at 10, an arrest in connection to that shooting between motorcycle gangs at a gas station. This all happened as thousands of people are in Volusia County to celebrate Bike Week.
The day everything changed. March 8th, 2025. Florida's Bike Week was in full swing. Engines roaring, neon lights flashing, families enjoying the coastal festivities. The streets of New Smyrna Beach buzzed with excitement as thousands of riders celebrated one of America's most famous motorcycle gatherings. Then, the surveillance cameras captured something that would change everything. Two groups of bikers rushing toward each other. A sudden fight breaking out. Then, the unmistakable crack of gunfire. One man raised a rifle and opened fire in broad daylight, right outside a gas station crowded with bystanders. People ran for their lives. Some ducked behind fuel pumps. Children were nearby. Panic spread like wildfire. This wasn't random violence. This was a planned confrontation tied to one of the most feared biker organizations in the country. What followed became one of the largest criminal crackdowns in recent Florida history. Operation Mongolian Beef, leading to the arrest of 28 men connected to violent biker clubs. The Wolves from California. The Mongols Motorcycle Club emerged from California in the 1960s, born from rejection and forged in violence. Originally Hispanic Vietnam veterans who were turned away by other biker groups, they created their own brotherhood that would evolve into something far more dangerous. One of the most powerful outlaw motorcycle clubs in the United States. Operating across several states with deep roots in the West and expanding chapters in the South and East, their influence runs wide. Law enforcement considers them an organized criminal network. Members have been tied to drug trafficking, illegal weapons, extortion, and violent assaults. When the Mongols move into new territory, they don't ask permission. They take space. They rarely back down from a challenge. That challenge came during Florida's Bike Week when they crossed paths with a local rival. The Warlocks Motorcycle Club, the Florida Defenders. The Warlocks had been a known presence in Florida for years. Their base was home turf, and they weren't just another weekend riding crew. Like the Mongols, they'd been linked to serious crimes, including shootings and drug operations. But their numbers were smaller. When outsiders like the Mongols pushed into Florida during high-profile events like Bike Week, tensions rose fast. These two clubs didn't get along. It wasn't just about territory. It was about respect, control, and power. Both groups carried reputations for violence, and both had members with long criminal histories. In the world of outlaw biker clubs, you don't walk away from a rivalry like this. It builds over time. It brews in backroom bars and biker events. And sometimes it explodes, just like it did at that gas station. What looked like a sudden shootout in public was actually the result of something deeper. Two violent groups competing for dominance, waiting for a spark. That spark hit during one of Florida's busiest motorcycle weeks, when both clubs had eyes on each other, and neither wanted to be the one to blink first. 13 minutes to violence. March 8th, 2025, right in the heart of Florida's annual Bike Week. Thousands of riders were in town, from Daytona Beach to the smaller cities along the coast. The event pumps millions into the local economy and draws huge crowds. But this time, something darker was brewing beneath the chrome and leather. At a gas station in New Smyrna Beach, two groups of bikers showed up within minutes of each other. First came the Warlocks. About 13 minutes later, the Mongols arrived. At first, there wasn't much movement. Then things escalated, fast. Security cameras picked up the moment it all went wrong. In broad daylight, fists were thrown. Shouting turned into chaos. Then someone pulled out a rifle. Gunfire erupted in front of families and bystanders. Two people were shot, and others narrowly escaped being caught in the crossfire. The terrifying part? This wasn't a random act of violence. Investigators believe this was a planned attack, an organized retaliation for an earlier clash. Authorities later confirmed that the bikers didn't end up at the gas station by coincidence. This was a targeted confrontation. What makes it even more dangerous is the setting. This wasn't a back alley or a remote road. It happened right in a public place during one of the busiest weeks of the year. Kids were nearby. Innocent people were just trying to get gas or snacks. Instead, they found themselves in the middle of a club shootout. law enforcement immediately launched a multi-agency response. The Volusia County Sheriff's Office, local police departments, and state agencies rushed to secure the area and gather evidence. Surveillance footage, shell casings, and witness reports became the early building blocks of a much larger operation. Sheriff Mike Chitwood didn't hold back. He called the shootout a complete act of lawlessness and said it was only luck that no innocent lives were lost. The community was shaken, and pressure was mounting for authorities to act fast. What started as a 13-minute gap between arrivals quickly became the spark for a massive takedown, and that takedown would soon have a name: Operation Mongolian Beef, the investigation machine. After the March 8th shooting in New Smyrna Beach, law enforcement didn't treat it like a one-off incident. They knew what they were dealing with. These weren't just local bikers getting into a scuffle. This was part of a deeper, more dangerous conflict between two organized and well-armed clubs. The investigation began, quietly but forcefully. What started at the gas station quickly became the launching point for a coordinated operation involving dozens of agencies. The Volusia County Sheriff's Office immediately began working with the FBI, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, state attorneys, and multiple sheriff's departments across Florida. Within weeks, the investigation had expanded far beyond Volusia County. They gave it a name: Operation Mongolian Beef. The name had meaning. Mongolian referred directly to the Mongols Motorcycle Club. Beef signified the growing tension, the feud that had now boiled over into open violence. What made this operation different was its scale. It wasn't just one county or even one region. It stretched across the entire state of Florida and even reached into Virginia. Multiple task forces were pulled together, and the focus was clear: dismantle the Mongols' growing presence before it escalated further. Detectives and agents started identifying key players. They examined social media posts, tracked cell phone records, analyzed surveillance footage from several locations, and worked their way through biker club hierarchies. What they found was alarming. Several Mongols involved in the shooting had prior connections to other violent events across the state, including a fatal shooting in Titusville in 2023. The deeper the task force looked, the clearer the picture became. The Mongols weren't just passing through Florida during Bike Week. They were planting roots. They had a clubhouse in Edgewater, held regular gatherings, and were expanding their network. Over the next few months, investigators pulled together enough evidence to move forward. Warrants were drafted, sealed, and prepared for a coordinated takedown. It wasn't just about arresting a few individuals. This would be a hit against the group's infrastructure, their weapons, and their communications. What made the planning even more delicate was the risk involved. These were armed men with military-style weapons and long criminal records. The raids had to be fast, precise, and overwhelming. By early summer, the stage was set. Law enforcement was ready to make their move. The target: Mongols members across multiple counties, from Volusia to Pasco, Brevard to Lake, and even beyond state lines. The result? A massive sweep was coming, and no one in the Mongols' MC saw it coming. Dawn of justice. July 2, 2025, nearly 4 months after the Bike Week shooting, law enforcement across Florida and parts of Virginia launched one of the largest coordinated criminal crackdowns in recent state history. Before sunrise, teams moved in. 14 search warrants were executed simultaneously across multiple counties. SWAT teams hit the Mongols' Edgewater clubhouse. Other units raided homes in Volusia, Lake, Osceola, Brevard, Polk, and Pasco counties. A separate team struck a property in Chesterfield County, Virginia. This wasn't a random sweep. It was a fully orchestrated operation. By the end of the day, 28 members of the Mongols Motorcycle Club were in custody. The primary charge: aggravated rioting, a serious second-degree felony under Florida law. This statute applies when 25 or more people act together to commit violence, vandalism, or disorder in a public place. Each suspect now faces up to 15 years in prison if convicted. The raids were about more than just arrests. They were a message. Law enforcement seized dozens of firearms, both handguns and rifles. In total, 38 pistols and 15 long guns were recovered. Many of them were unregistered or illegally modified. Authorities also found ammunition stockpiles, tactical gear, body armor, and club paraphernalia. In addition to weapons, officers discovered significant quantities of drugs. The seizure included methamphetamine, marijuana, fentanyl, and various prescription pills. Several suspects were also caught with over $10,000 in cash, believed to be proceeds from drug trafficking and illegal activities. According to authorities, the Mongols weren't just operating like a club. They were structured more like a criminal enterprise, with hierarchies, chain of command, and defined roles within the club. That's part of why so many departments got involved. The FBI, state prosecutors, local sheriffs, and narcotics task forces all played critical roles in executing the operation. Some of the suspects arrested had long criminal records. Others had direct links to the March 8th shooting. A few were already out on bond for other violent crimes when the raids took place. 3 key suspects, believed to have helped organize the retaliation against the warlocks, are still at large, with active warrants issued for their arrests. At a press conference, law enforcement made it clear this wasn't the end of the investigation. It was a major blow, but not the final one. Operation Mongolian Beef had achieved what many in the community were hoping for: a firm public takedown of a growing threat. But even after 28 arrests, officials warned that there could be more charges, more raids, and more names added to the list. Because this wasn't just about what happened at a gas station. It was about stopping something much bigger before it got worse. The arsenal revealed. When the warrants were served, deputies and agents didn't just put handcuffs on suspects. They pulled dangerous hardware off the street. Investigators collected a large haul of firearms, including many pistols and multiple long guns taken from homes and meeting spots tied to the club. Alongside the weapons, teams logged boxes of ammunition and cash counted on the spot. They also cataloged illegal drugs found during the searches: methamphetamine, marijuana, and fentanyl among them, packaged and sealed as evidence before being moved to secure storage. The scale mattered. This wasn't a few items tossed into a bag. It was a coordinated seizure spread across several locations. Each item was photographed, tagged, and tracked to build a clean chain of custody. Detectives then matched what they recovered with what they had already documented from the March 8th scene: video, witness statements, and prior arrest records to strengthen the case. Officials said the evidence helps explain why this incident triggered such a broad response. The volume of guns and the mix of narcotics point to more than a roadside brawl. It reflects an organized network with access to weapons, money, and supply lines. Exactly the kind of profile state and federal partners target when they move together. That is why the case didn't stop at local charges. The seizures feed into a wider picture of how the group moved, gathered, and prepared, and why the public setting of that gas station shootout set off alarm bells across agencies. All of this now sits in evidence lockers while the case continues. For prosecutors, it's the backbone of what comes next, tying people to places, weapons to suspects, and activity to the chaos that played out in front of families during Bike Week. And for the community, it's a sign that authorities didn't just react to a headline. They went after the tools that made the violence possible, the faces behind the crimes. As the dust settled from the coordinated raids, law enforcement revealed the names of those facing charges. These weren't just low-level hang-arounds or new recruits. Many of the 28 arrested were full-patch members of the Mongols Motorcycle Club, men with established ties to the group and, in some cases, long criminal records. Among those taken into custody were individuals like Tyler Araya, Max Bastuardo, and Joseph Aguirre, each now charged with aggravated rioting. Some of them were also found in possession of illegal firearms, narcotics, or stolen property during the searches. Others had outstanding warrants or were already on probation or bond for unrelated charges. The arrests were spread across 6 Florida counties, plus 1 in Virginia, showing how widely the Mongols had positioned themselves across the state. Each suspect was booked locally, but the coordination was managed at the state level, with prosecuting attorneys working closely with federal partners to ensure every case would be solid in court. Authorities emphasized that this was more than just a symbolic action. The use of Florida's aggravated rioting statute, usually reserved for larger-scale public threats, was a deliberate move. In this case, the March 8th event met every element of the charge. more than 25 individuals working together to commit a violent, public act. That charge alone carries up to 15 years in prison. Add weapons violations or drug possession to the mix, and some of these men could face even longer behind bars. Law enforcement officials also made it clear that more arrests could follow. At least 3 men are still being actively sought. These individuals are believed to have helped coordinate the confrontation with the warlocks, either through messages, transportation, or bringing weapons to the site. Their identities are known, and warrants have already been issued. It's only a matter of time. The goal of releasing these names wasn't just to hold people accountable. It was also to warn the public, and other clubs, that this case wasn't going to disappear quietly. These are real people facing real consequences for a public act of violence. And the agencies involved are signaling that Florida won't allow organized biker violence to take root in its cities. This wasn't the end of something. It was just the first wave. Why this matters. Florida's Bike Week is meant to bring people together. Bikers, families, and tourists from across the country. But when outlaw motorcycle clubs turn those streets into battlegrounds, it's no longer just a biker event. It becomes a threat to public safety. What happened at that gas station wasn't just about 2 clubs fighting for dominance. It was about how far these groups are willing to go, even in broad daylight, to defend their image and turf. And that puts everyday people at risk. Authorities say many of the suspects tied to the March 8th shooting had links to a separate club-related killing in Titusville back in 2023. That means this violence didn't start overnight. It had been building for a while, and without intervention, it likely would have escalated even further. That's what made this case different. It wasn't just about solving one shooting, it was about preventing the next one. By targeting leadership, weapons, and locations tied to the Mongols, law enforcement made it harder for the group to operate in the open. Sheriffs from multiple counties said the same thing. This was about restoring peace before the streets turned into something worse. With so many people attending events like Bike Week, any public clash could quickly become a mass casualty situation. And that's not a chance law enforcement was willing to take. In the eyes of investigators, these clubs aren't just motorcycle enthusiasts with a bad reputation. They're organized, armed, and active. The longer they operate unchecked, the more bold they become. And when that boldness spills into neighborhoods, into family spaces, and onto public streets, that's when law enforcement draws a line. What Operation Mongolian Beef exposed wasn't just a shooting, it was a network. And for many in Florida, that made it all the more urgent to shut it down. The investigation continues. Even with 28 arrests, Operation Mongolian Beef isn't over. Law enforcement officials have confirmed that the investigation remains active. Teams are still reviewing hours of surveillance footage, phone records, and digital communications pulled from seized devices. They're connecting the dots, not just from the shooting itself, but from the months leading up to it. Authorities believe more people may have played a role before, during, or after the March 8th attack. That includes those who helped plan the meetup, transported weapons, or tried to hide evidence after the fact. Charges could still be filed in the coming weeks. Prosecutors are also preparing for trial. With this much evidence, guns, drugs, digital records, building strong cases takes time, but they're moving carefully to make sure convictions stick. The message from law enforcement is clear. This was just the beginning. Other clubs are being watched. Any sign of retaliation or regrouping will be met with the same kind of coordinated pressure. Because in their eyes, this isn't just about punishing crime, it's about preventing the next headline before it's written. The lingering questions: one gas station, 2 rival clubs, and a single moment that triggered a statewide takedown. Operation Mongolian Beef wasn't just about arrests. It exposed a hidden network operating across Florida. And it showed what happens when law enforcement pushes back, hard. The 28 men now sitting in jail cells face years behind bars for their role in bringing violence to a public place where families should have felt safe. The weapons, drugs, and money seized during the raids tell a story of an organization that was prepared for war, but unprepared for the coordinated response that followed. But questions remain. Will this break the cycle of violence, or will other clubs simply adapt their methods? Are there more networks operating in the shadows, waiting for their moment to claim territory through intimidation and bloodshed? The investigation continues, the trials approach, And somewhere, in communities across America, other conflicts may be brewing between groups that believe violence is an acceptable way to resolve disputes over respect, territory, and power. The surveillance cameras at that gas station in New Smyrna Beach captured more than just a shooting. They documented the moment when law enforcement decided that enough was enough. Whether Operation Mongolian Beef will be remembered as the beginning of the end for organized biker violence in Florida, or simply as one battle in a war that never truly ends, remains to be seen. Time will tell whether those 13 minutes changed everything, or whether they were just another chapter in a story that's far from over.